Today's webinar, 20 tests in 30 minutes. And our vision for this webinar today on May 20th in 2020 with 20 tests, we hope our vision will be 2020 for you. And today is also World Bee Day. So in honor of the important role that bees play in our ecosystem, we hope we're going to cross-pollinate knowledge today and contribute to the hive mind. Now, here's the buzz on today's webinar. It is being recorded, and we will share the slides with you afterward. So we're going to get started because you catch more donors with honey, and this content is everyone's beeswax. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. This is our agenda. Or if you prefer, here's an A-B split test for our agenda. Which one do you prefer? Which evokes more of an emotional response for the content you're about to see today? Please keep that in mind. We're going to move on to introductions, and then we'll talk about testing, and then the spotlight of why we're here is to see 20 tests in 30 minutes by World Wildlife Fund. And then we're going to end with some Q&A. Well, my name is Sally Heaven. I am a co-founder of Raise Heck, and our consulting company helps the best nonprofits with the best missions use the best software in the best way. And I do this along with my colleague Charlotte Cressy, who is here to monitor your questions in the chat. And I'm going to ask Gaby Golub to introduce herself.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. Can I be heard? Wonderful. Hi, my name is Gaby Golub. I'm a manager of online membership and marketing at World Wildlife Fund. I generally manage our online donation forms and our email appeals, special campaigns throughout the year, such as membership drives, Giving Tuesday, and year-end giving.
All right, thank you, Gaby. And one other item before we jump into the content. This webinar wasn't originally going to be a webinar. It was going to be a session at the Nonprofit Technology Conference 2020 in Baltimore. And when that event had to be canceled due to COVID-19, Gaby agreed very graciously to bring it to you virtually via webinar. So what we've done, and you'll get this link when we send the slides afterwards, is N10 lost some of their planned budget from the conference, and so they're doing fundraising to make up the gap. So we've created a fundraising campaign under their umbrella that will allow you to make a donation if you haven't yet. So NTC 2021 can come back strong. Charlotte is going to post the link in the chat if you're feeling very generous right this minute and you want to donate right away to N10. All right, so let's talk about testing. Most of the testing examples you're going to see today are A/B testing, and that's where two versions of content are randomly served up to the participant, and you measure which one does better. So if you've ever seen the website Which Test Won, those are examples of A/B testing. There's also multivariant testing, where you test more than two versions, and you can do that if your sample size is big enough. But if you're just getting started, then A/B testing is easier. So why do we do testing at all? It's quite simply better performance and to get better results. And we want to get better results on our emails. We want to have better open rates, more people putting their eyes on our content. And we also want a better click-through rate, so people who are actually clicking through to see whatever the page is behind the link. Many times, that is donation pages. And we're doing testing on the pages as well to increase conversion and also see if we can boost people's average gift or even convince them to make a sustaining gift and give monthly. So there's all kinds of testing. We'll see a lot about email and donation pages today. So a few basic principles of testing. Now, if you took science in school, And sorry, if folks could mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you. All right. So if you remember, you should test just one variable at a time, because otherwise you're not going to know what was the thing that moved the needle. And in fact, if you're testing more than 2 variables at a time, they could even combine to have a synergistic effect. And we're trying to boil this down to the basics. So another important concept is statistical significance. And this just means how large does your sample size need to be for your results to be valid. So there is an equation that you can use if you want to calculate it on paper by hand, but it's much easier these days just to use an online calculator. So you'll get the link to that one, as well as a couple of Gaby's favorite examples that she has linked in some later content. And one thing to keep in mind is, even though we're trying to make this scientific, this is not actually an exact science, because we create our messages and our donation pages, and then we send them out into the world to people. And people are different depending on a variety of factors that we don't necessarily know about and we definitely cannot control. So for example, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. Your organization may be having much greater than normal open rates, or you might be having much smaller than normal open rates. Chances are next year, once the pandemic is over, let's hope, the same tests that you run today may have wildly different results a year later. So it's always a good idea to rerun tests to see if you get the same result or something different. So what are the things that you should test? Well, we've talked about email, subject lines. If you want people to open your email, make your subject lines interesting. And you can test personalization in your subject lines. Does it help or hurt if you call people by their first name? Does it matter if they are already donors or if they're new prospects? What if you use emojis in your subject line? Do people love it or hate it? Does it depend on how old they are? You don't know until you test, and the results can vary between organizations because the makeup of your house files is probably different depending on your mission. You also want to test mechanisms to engage your users. And what I mean by that is mainly clicks that get people to do something with your email. This is really important, especially in this day and age of email deliverability, where you want people to interact with your emails in order to continue delivering to the inbox, according to the algorithms of Google and Yahoo and other mailbox providers. So make your clicks interesting and enticing, but do try to stay on the right side of not sending clickbait, because you don't want to erode trust with your users. You are never going to believe what comes next on this slide. Conversion. So on donation forms, you can test things like copy, images. If you make your links long or short, is that interesting? Does it cause a difference? Is there no difference? What if you bold some text? What if you have pictures of dogs or cats or tigers or elephants? How can you do things to increase the amount people are willing to give? Does it matter if you acknowledge how much they've given in the past? What creates the emotional moment for people to give now? And what can create the emotional moment for them to make a sustaining gift? There's a lot of things to test. You can test tone and all kinds of things. And remember, it may vary from week to week. So as with anything, before you do it, you should start with why. I told you that in testing, in general, we're doing testing to improve the outcomes and to get better results. And for each test you run, you should take a pause before you start setting things up and ask, why are we testing this? What are we planning on testing? When are we going to do it? And this is really important for maybe if you're in the middle of a campaign, here's a great idea. Do a test so you can apply the result to the second half of the campaign and maybe even raise more money from the campaign. Sometimes you might be testing your entire house file. Sometimes you might be testing a subset of people. Maybe you want to see who responds better to your email, Maryland or Virginia, Ohio or Michigan. Where is also very important. How are you going to measure it? But finally, I think in some ways this is most important. you should only gather data that you're going to use. And for testing, you should test things that you have a good shot at applying the results of to your future work. Gaby's going to show you an awesome example of keeping track of testing. And I even submit that when you have copy and creative that you're testing, that if you keep a running PowerPoint or Google Slide document and paste the examples into that PowerPoint every week, every month, that you will have a running PowerPoint that you can present to your leadership, your team, your executives who are interested in your work, or maybe even on a webinar like this at short notice. Your content will be ready-made. All right, now it is poll time. We are going to launch a poll for you, and we'll give you just a few minutes to answer this question via the Zoom poll. It's completely anonymous. We just want to know if your organization is doing lots of testing or a little. We're going to give you about 15 more seconds. And while we wait, I'll tell you a quick joke. I hired an earthworm, a centipede, and a millipede to do my email marketing. Why? Because they're really good at segmentation. All right. Most of you, it looks like, have voted. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So can everyone see those results? It looks like people are doing some testing, some are doing a lot, and a few of you are never doing it. All right. Well, with that, we're going to ask Gaby to present her content. So please be patient for a moment while we transfer presenting privileges to Gaby.
Okay, I think we're all set. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to World Wildlife Fund, the world's leading conservation organization, and thank you so much for being here on World Bee Day. Did you know that WWF is focused on much more than wildlife and natural places? We were founded nearly 60 years ago, and our true north is actually helping people and nature thrive. Our programs are generally organized around these 6 areas: forests, fresh water, oceans, wildlife, climate, and food. And our mission is to conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth. We work in more than 100 countries. So I thought it would be useful for you to see how we record our data. We track all these numbers for each email, how many people we sent an email to, how many of those messages were actually delivered, how many people opened, what the open rate is, how many people clicked, what the click rate is, etc. So we track all of these, record all this in Excel, and then go to an online calculator to see if there's a clear winner with statistical significance. Okay, I am eager to show you a whole bunch of tests that we've run at WWF, and I just wanted to make 2 quick notes. The winners that we got might actually not be winners for you, so I encourage you to test for yourselves. And the other thing is, as Sally mentioned earlier, they may be winners for us at one point and then losers later. So we like to test all the time and retest. So to start with, from lines. We often test and retest from lines. They're one of the most critical elements of your email, so you really want to optimize them as best you can. Here are just a few examples of some from line tests that we've run. I've included the from lines, the subject lines, and the preview text, since this combination is really all critical to whether people decide to open your emails or not. So for the first pair, we wanted people to take our survey and then donate after they submitted it. The open rate was actually pretty close, but all the other metrics showed that the version on the right was the runaway winner. There were so many more clicks, many more surveys taken, and more donations made. And we've seen similar results with similar kinds of emails. I think this format has really been a game changer for us. This kind of from line with specificity has led to much better results for people taking our quizzes and surveys. So for the second pair, we wanted people to send an e-card, and especially to choose the option where they donate and send an e-card for Mother's Day. So this from line here from WWF e-cards resulted in a higher open rate, 47% higher click-through rate, and twice as many donations. For the final pair, we wanted people, whom we had already emailed several times, to finally make a donation on the last day of this campaign. The open rate was about 40% higher for the midnight deadline from line, which is an enormous difference. I thought this would be an interesting example to share with you. As you can see, the two on the left are the same and the two on the right are the same. So what's the difference? I ran this test to two different audiences. For the top pair, the audience was people who were less engaged with WWF in our email. And for the bottom pair, where WWF, including that in the front line, was the winner, the audience was more engaged with us. The open rate was higher for the versions that didn't include WWF, but we saw differences with the other figures, the click-through rate, click-to-open rate, and the conversion rate. For one audience, that B version led to higher rates, and for the other audience, the other version did better. So since our goal was a higher conversion rate, that's what mattered most. And just to underscore the point, even simple tests can get complicated. Okay, let's move on to a couple of subject line tests. For the first pair, yes?
Quick question that came in through the chat. Can you clarify what the highlighting is for?
Oh, sure. Just to draw your attention to the differences between the versions on the left and the right. Just, you can feel free to read the rest of the text on the screen, but just to draw your eye to what I was testing.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's see. So for these couple of subject line examples, for the first pair, my goal was to get more people to take a quiz and then donate. And I wondered if the location of the recipient's first name was going to affect these actions. So I sent one version with the name at the beginning of the subject line and one version with the name at the end. And for the second pair, I wanted more members to donate again to renew their membership. And I wondered if a subject line that was more of a polite invitation to see something would get that result better than a subject line that was kind of more of a command. People are generally drawn to their own name. So in the top pair, the subject line with the first name first won. And in the second pair, I think the combination of having the first name first and the nature of the request led to a winner. Okay, now let's look at email content. I know the text might be a little bit small, so I'll highlight the differences for you. In the version on the left, the words that are hyperlinked say, when you make a monthly donation today, and please donate monthly today. In the version on the right, the linked text reads, stand up for elephants today, and act now to help protect elephants in nature worldwide. In both versions, the rest of the text talks about how you'll make a difference for elephants and nature when you donate monthly. But we wondered, could we inspire more people to start that gift if we emphasize the difference they'll make in those links? So we confirmed that yes, donors really want to solve problems. They donate so they can help protect nature or feed the hungry or find a cure, whatever your mission is. So you may find that highlighting that solution and not the transaction so much will bring you more donors. Emails where you offer a match are really great for testing because they often get a strong response. So the idea of a donation being doubled with a match is really persuasive. And we wanted to see, when we had a match a while ago, if examples of doubling would make a difference. There were about the same rates for opens and clicks to opens, but the conversion rate, how many people donated divided by how many people clicked, was 25% higher for the version on the right. More people got the message that their donation would be doubled. I sent this email on the last day of a membership campaign, and I wanted to see if this feature that I've drawn your attention to with an arrow, where my name is shown and along with a pending status and the campaign deadline, if all of that would heighten FOMO and grab people's attention and increase the response rate. And it really did. The test version had a much higher click-through rate and conversion rate. One of our biggest game changers was this test. We sometimes have campaigns with a donor goal and a deadline because those are two really effective tactics. We wanted to see if we could better inspire donors to help show them how they could help us reach our goal. And we ran this test. We wondered if we put our goal in, if we put our goal in local terms, showing each supporter's state and a fraction of the number of donors we were still hoping to find, would make people think, I could be one of 19 donors, I can help reach that goal. And this test version that I've highlighted was the clear winner for all of our metrics. And the overall result, there were more than twice as many gifts made through that email. So this test was a big surprise to me. I always assumed that people would respond better to our emails if they had an animal photo in them. So after we sent people a few emails with this penguin photo, asking them to vote on the cover of the 2020 calendar, we sent this email where we were testing to see which worked better, using that same image that was part of the campaign with a new call to action to see the calendar cover, or having no image at all. To my surprise, the email with no photo had a much higher click to open rate. So one good lesson here is your assumptions might not be right. We sometimes email people to ask them to take a quiz, and the last question of the quiz is essentially, will you protect nature and make a donation? So we wondered if showing people the first multiple choice question in the email would encourage them to take a guess and click. And in fact, it didn't. It seems that offering mystery and inviting curiosity can draw more people in. We typically don't offer thank you gifts or premiums in our email appeals, but when we added a stainless steel straw and a cleaning brush to our thank you gift collection, we thought it might really persuade people to join WWF during a membership campaign. Maybe it was because people made the connection between this gift and protecting nature by reducing plastic waste, or maybe they just found this item to be rather desirable. Either way, including the straw offer in emails and on the donation form was the winner, and so we continued to offer this throughout the campaign. Another game changer for us recently has been sending what I call value affirming surveys, asking our supporters to take a quick survey about wildlife and nature. These emails are always great for engagement. Many of our supporters open, click through, and take these surveys. They're actually also good for fundraising. After people submit the survey that reminded them that they care about our cause, we ask them on the thank you page to make a gift, and I'll illustrate this a little bit later. These people often donate at a much higher rate than when we actually just send them an email appeal asking them to donate. Plus, we always learn a lot from the survey responses. So with the test shown here, we thought that we would put that value affirming question front and center. The version on the right asks people, do you think it's important to protect nature? Yes or no? Choosing yes feels good. These buttons increased clicks and responses by 20%. So before I wrap up the email examples, I wanted to share with you one example of what we call next level email testing. So just as a quick background, we have an online gift center where you can symbolically adopt a species and get a plush animal, or donate and get a t-shirt or socks. The gift center has a lot of items, and each email features just a few of them. A few months ago, we tested including a search bar in the email, which you can see at the top, and it won. And so now we include it in every gift center email. It invites people to explore the gift center website and find the perfect thing that they're looking for. So as you get emails from companies and nonprofits, look out for innovative features that may work well in your own emails. So now I'll show you a few tests that we've run on our donation forms. You've probably seen this option shown in the lower example on other nonprofits' donation forms. When donors cover transaction fees, not only does it help their donation go farther, but it lets them help a cause even more that they care about, and that feels good. I ran this test recently where I wanted to encourage people who clicked links from an email to make a monthly gift, but I didn't want to decrease the conversion rate. So the majority of people who landed on that form where monthly was pre-selected, they did click one time and made a one-time gift, but not too surprisingly, it yielded more monthly gifts than the other version where one time was the default. That led to a higher donor lifetime value, which is pretty key. Another way to encourage monthly giving is with an upsell that appears after people complete the form and click submit. I've tested this a few times and gotten mixed results, often with the version on the left where people can choose right away if they want to make a monthly gift or a one-time gift. You'll end up with more monthly gifts than when people are served the upsell and they can choose after they've completed the form. But with the version on the right with the upsell, you often will get more gifts in total, even though most of them are one-time gifts. We have a pretty big renewal program, and I wondered if donors would be interested in agreeing to an automatic annual renewal, like how most magazine subscriptions are. I was glad to see that this option didn't affect the conversion rate, and a lot of donors checked the box agreeing to be charged every year afterwards to renew their membership automatically. A while ago, I wanted to see if a higher suggested or default amount would encourage people to give more without discouraging them from giving at all. And it did. The majority gave $8, but many people stuck with the suggested amount, and there was no negative impact on the conversion rate. So I'm keen to run this test again. It's been a little while, but when I ran this on our main donation forms with the button at the bottom of the form after people had filled it out, I was wondering if the language would inspire people more to give, if asking them when they submitted their form, donate or make my donation. And in fact, the straightforward submit wording did the best. I've also wondered if more people might complete a donation form if they could type in their payment information before getting to the contact information section, which is always a little bit longer. I've tested this a couple of times and neither version has done better than the other. So I'm almost done, and before I go, I wanted to share a couple of examples with you. They aren't tests, but just examples of when you might ask for donations and find that a lot of people are ready to give. In this example, I sent a survey email shown on the left. Lots of people clicked through to share their thoughts on protecting wildlife, and when they submitted the survey, they landed on a donation form. And this tactic has worked really well. Of course, we genuinely want to hear what people think and how they feel, and we'll be mindful not to deploy this too often, but we've been pretty pleased with the revenue results from this tactic. And my other example is regarding action pages. This is pretty much universal practice, but I just wanted to share it with you to show you what the journey looks like and just to mention how effective it is. We send an advocacy email shown on the left, asking people to sign a petition, contact an official. They land on the action page and complete it. Then they land on the thank you page, which asks them to take the next step by donating. When they click submit, they get a pop-up asking them to take the next step and give monthly. So this whole process has been a terrific source of revenue for us. That concludes all my testing examples. And before I go, I just wanted to share with you some of my favorite resources. And thank you so much for being here. And I hope that you all are well.
All right. Well, thank you, Gaby. That was fantastic. That was 20 tests, and I think even maybe a few minutes fewer than 30 minutes. So awesome. And just to reiterate, all of those useful resources that Gaby showed on the slide will come your way when we share the slide deck after this webinar. So now we have ample time for questions and answers. Since we're in a Zoom meeting, we're going to offer you 2 ways to do this. If you'd like to ask a question live, then can you please use the Zoom function that says raise your hand, and we will, Charlotte will call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. And then we will answer your question on the spot. And if we don't know the answer, we'll say that's a great question. We'll get back to you. And if you'd prefer to type your question, then you can just type it in the chat and we will read it for you. So anyone have a question to start with? Perhaps I'll break the ice then. Oh, I won't, because Brittany has a question. How soon or how do you decide to retest something that had a significant result?
That is a great and challenging question. I don't know that there's any right answer. I think I just often have a lot of ideas percolating, and when the opportunity arises to retest something from before, or if I'm seeing it a lot more often with other nonprofits, then I might take that opportunity to retest.
Oh, that's a good answer. Thank you, Gaby. Here's our next question coming from Emily. Can you suggest some good starter tests for organizations who have never tested before?
Can I think probably an email subject line test would probably be a good place to start. It seems kind of low risk for me, whether that's trying the first name first in the subject line or including an emoji or something more direct versus something more mysterious. I might suggest that. One thing to note, depending on the size of your email audience, is you may be able to send a test just to a portion of the audience. Say, send your A version to 10% and your B version to another 10%. So you're not risking in one go something that may fail miserably, or at least may not do very well with half of your audience.
Awesome. I'd like to add also that I think something that I'm really interested in no small thanks to World Wildlife Fund's leadership on this this tactic, is sustaining gifts and recurring gifts. And what are the results if you offer a one-time gift versus you know, the pre-selected ability to make a monthly gift, or if you even in fact straight up ask people, please make your gift monthly, here's why, or please, stand up for elephants monthly, in some value affirming way, and to calculate the results, not just from money raised, but also, lifetime value and annual value of all those donations. So that's, I think, that's one place that I would start if I were starting to test. Another question has come up from Katie. When you test your donation page tests, do you test across all pages or just one main form?
That's a great question and a great thing to consider. A lot of the donation form tests that I run through our emails. So our audiences will get one of two emails that are identical, and depending on which version they get and click through, then they'll see a different donation form. So that's one kind of donation form testing that I do. And at year end, for example, if I might run a test sort of in parallel where I want to see, will something do better with our website audience? If people click donate, they get split between two different variants. And I'll run the same test through email to see if the results are consistent with that audience. So as far as that goes, that's sort of the mechanics of how I might run a donation form test. And otherwise, just in general, I would just run a test either on one form, or we have some forms that are kind of packaged together, and it would be a little confusing if donors went from one to another and saw something that was quite different. Let's say we wanted to test the layout. So if it's something that might be distracting, I would run the same test across multiple forms.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that actually leads, to a couple of follow-up questions. So one follow-up question from Katie is, what tool do you use to split traffic to two versions of a donation form via the web?
Currently, we use Google Optimize, and previously we were using VWO, which I think stands for Visual Website Optimizer.
All right. So Katie's follow-up question, provokes this question for me. All of these tests that you've shown to us, Gaby, and then discussion of tools that you're using, all of these things take a certain amount of time to set up. And how do you, I assume that you've landed on something, that you're fairly conversant with now, and dare I say even expert at using. So it takes up less of your time maybe than in the beginning. But when you're planning out your campaign and your tests, how do you make the judgment call for how much time it'll take to set up one test or a multivariant version versus like how much useful information do we think we will get? How do you make that call?
Well, that's a challenging question and a good one. I'm not sure I have a simple answer for that. I think that most of the tests that I run aren't particularly time consuming to implement. I feel like I spend more time crunching numbers and looking at the latest results and throwing them into a statistical significance calculator, which I recently read is not a great practice. So I will be sure to do that less and less. But yeah, I suppose just in general, if I'm deciding whether to run one test or another, I might try to either talk through with someone else or think through on my own the possible value of one winner versus another. If it's let's try to increase this by $1 and see if that makes a difference. My gut says that's not going to make a huge difference over time, but changing something a little more dramatically might have more dramatic effect and a bigger impact, and that might be one worth pursuing.
I imagine that you probably develop that expertise over time, even though our assumptions aren't always correct. You might get sort of a sixth sense about what is likely to produce a dramatic impact. And speaking of a sixth sense, I have a feeling that the next question is going to be from Liz. And it is, Liz asks, do you usually test on a subset of your audience and then go out with the winner? Or do you split your full file in half and use the test results for future reference?
Both. It depends on what the email is and what the test is, but I guess lately more and more I've been testing 10 or I should say 20 or 50% of an audience, running a test in the morning and then checking after a few hours, let's say it's an email test, to see if there's a winner I can roll out with that day or else the next day. But fairly often I do run tests for an entire audience. Trying to think with the test that I'm going to be doing on Friday, I think I'm just going to split that 50-50. Part of that is challenges with some of the tools I use to assess the differences. So it's always good if you factor that in, if it's going to be a real bear to crunch your numbers. You might want to think of whether how valuable it is to do that test and whether you want to test it to 20 or 50% of your audience instead of 100%. And regarding Liz's next question about not using statistical significance calculators, I read a lot of blogs, some of which I mentioned on my resources slide, and I think there might have been a recommendation. Maybe it wasn't one of these, but in Future Fundraising Now or in the Agitator, there might have been a recommendation against doing that, that you might be skewing your own results or finding out inconclusive information that you make a conclusion out of.
It is very interesting to hear that a statistical significance calculator may not add up. I'm sure nobody wants to be divisive, but we all are looking to multiply our results. And I am very sorry on World Bee Day if any of these puns brought with them a sting. I am going to ask Gaby to advance to the very last slide as we are coming up on our promised end time of 2:45 for a short and sweet webinar. So I and Charlotte want to thank Gaby so much for agreeing to present her session with us via webinar. And again, we invite you to support N10 by making a donation, and we hope we'll see you all at N10 2021 in Pittsburgh next year. For RaiseHeck, you can